I think it's not mutually exclusive in that if you always act with integrity, if you are kind, it's just not the same goal. Do you see what I mean? So if you're acting as a kind leader, naturally there'll be a kind of osmosis where people understand that sometimes you need to make tough decisions as long as you're being kind and you're explaining the why. So it won't mean that they don't like you. It's that they understand the decisions that were made and that needed to be difficult. And I think it's not about not being liked. You can't expect people to like you all the time. Sometimes it's a personality thing. But I think as long as people understand the processes behind what you've done, then they will naturally probably like you more than they would if you were delivering things in an unkind way. What I wanted to do was pull together everything, if that makes sense. So you've got Radical Candor, you've got Dare to Lead, you've got Simon Sinek's Start With Why, you've got all of these different books and ideas and experiences that people have. And I just thought, I'm still a teacher at heart. We need something to remember it by. So I was driving along by I don't sleep, I've got ADHD. And I was driving along by a petrol station and I was thinking, I need something that helps people remember. And so I was driving along and I just thought, hang on, Simon Sinek says that you can chase happiness. Oh, you could chase kindness. And then I was thinking, hang on a minute. My brain was like working at 100 miles an hour and I just thought, hang on, communication, this works. So I thought communication, honesty, accountability, self-esteem and ego. I have to be honest, I started with the ego first. So the E was the first one that I was thinking about, because I think a lot of things that leaders do when they're unkind is because their ego's out of control. I apologised to somebody the other day because she said, have I done something to offend you? And I said, I'm really sorry. I'm just super busy and I'm a bit stressed. So I'm not my usual happy, smiley self. And she went, oh, that's all right. Then I said, but thank you for asking, because I'd rather, she said, have I done something to upset you? And I could go, oh, no, I haven't, than her going away and thinking I must have done something to upset her and then that upset her. But it's about just what you were saying before, it's professional dialogue.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. Thank you for tuning in. If you have got, whenever you're doing this, whether you're at home with your kids, whether you're at school, whether you're on the drive, whether you're in the shower, whether you're in the gym, wherever you are, we're grateful that you joined us. Steve, it's another one. We've got another brilliant guest waiting in the wings, ready to have a conversation. But it's been pretty epic the last few weeks, months, years, hasn't it? Some of the stuff that's been happening.
Like a rolling stone, mate. I'll be honest. It's just
no moss on these bad boys,
and a very steep hill. It's fast paced. It's is it going to break or is it going to bounce really, really high? And is it going to be a bit more of a snowball? I think it's more. I say rock, maybe like a snowball. It's going fast, but it's gathering and we're collecting lots as we go down the hills. No, it's been an absolute blast, and yeah, I can't believe that we're into the summer now. So
madness.
So yeah, Madness. It's absolute chaos. But yeah, all good here.
Good. But I'm going to get straight into it because we want to make sure that we optimise the time we've got with our guest, who is joining us. I'll let them tell us where they're joining us from in the studio. And we're very excited because this is another one of our partnerships with the team from Crown House Publishing, because our guest has written a book called Kind Leadership. Link for that will be in the show notes to get your copy of it. But we were connected to Joanna via the team at Crown House. Obviously, we've just published a book with them, but Joanna's is way better than ours, way more thought through and researched, and way more a proper education book, right? Not like us two trying to play at it. So we're very, very grateful that she's joining us, and we're looking forward to digging into some of that today. Joanna, thank you for joining us in the Edufuturists studio. Tell us a little bit about you, your background, and how you, in fact, actually tell us where you are as well.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm Joanna. I am sitting here in 50 degrees in very sunny Abu Dhabi in the UAE. It's very nice and quiet now. I have to say it hasn't been in March and April. I didn't ever think I'd be able to sit here telling you that I was a principal of a school in a war zone. But things have quietened down now, thank goodness. I started teaching in the UK. So I first started teaching in the lovely Manchester, where I worked as a religious studies teacher. And then I moved up to the northeast, near to where my parents were. So I worked in inner city Sunderland and in Durham city centre. And then our family decided we'd always wanted to go and live in France. And I was really lucky. I got a job in an international school in France. We were there for 15 years. And then 6 years ago, we came out to the UAE.
Can I just jump in before you say something, Steve? I
Let's
don't
do
know
it.
if you would know, a lot of our listeners will already be familiar that I'm a religious studies teacher by trade. And
See, we're the best.
well, I like to think so. But we teach make believe. Steve teaches running, kicking, jumping. So as a PE teacher, so we're in good companies. I didn't know that. I didn't do that piece of research. So I'm pleased that
Oh, I miss it.
that we've got another connection.
I love my job. I love being the principal of a school, but I really, really miss teaching religious studies. It's just a joy to teach.
Yeah, agreed.
So was your, I suppose, let's step into that. International schools is something that we're probably not, we have examples in the book, I suppose, in terms of not necessarily schooling, but internationally. People talk about in different schools and different opportunities. So tell us then, was it a teaching role or did you step into leadership straight from the outset when you moved over?
When I moved over, I actually went, because this is going to make Ben upset, you're not allowed to teach religious studies in France. So I moved over and became the head of inclusion in the school and then got promoted to being the deputy head there. So it was quite a small international school just outside of Cannes, very lovely. And for me, people say, why did I stay so long? Lots of things. It was a lovely place to work. And also my kids were there. So my kids were able to go all the way through. So my youngest one started when she was 5 until she was 18. And we moved over here when she was at university. It's different working in international schools.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had the privilege of being out in the Middle East quite a lot with work, and another set of international schools in other countries as well. And it is a different gravy, right? So the fact that they are by nature international, as in you've got lots of different nationalities generally, tends to be, and I know that it'd be different in where you are potentially, but tends to be there's some. It's either an English school or it's an American international school, and therefore you get your expats in there. You get those that are in the services or that are working in industry out in those specialist places, and it creates a real melting pot, doesn't it? Beautifully melting pot. And as an RE teacher, who appreciates different cultures and different perspectives, and actually how important that is for the development of every young person, then international schools are magical for that, aren't they?
They really are. And I would say when I worked in France, it was truly international. I mean, there were hundreds of different nationalities in the school, and it really was a melting pot, which in some respects, it's interesting. It's fascinating to learn about different cultures and different backgrounds and things, and that's great. Where I'm working at now in the UAE, we're 91% local kids and virtually 100%, 99.9% Muslim. And that's where being a religious studies teacher comes in really useful, because they can't get one over on me. So sometimes the kids will do something naughty and I'll just go like, we had a fight between two, not a physical fight, a verbal fight between two girls the other day. And I said, what's happened? Somebody told me that, somebody told somebody that, somebody said this. And I just said, what does it say in the Holy Quran, girls, about gossip? It's haram. And they went, oh, yeah. And I went, so if somebody says something to you, you should say, that's haram. You're not allowed to gossip. And they went, oh, miss, you're right. Thank you. They made friends and they walked out. And it's just like, so this is where it's really useful to understand the Holy Quran, because I can use it for behaviour management.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I have lots of funny stories in this, because where I taught in Accrington primarily, there was we had a melting pot of different ethnicities as well, and we had probably about 30%, 40% British Pakistani Muslims in that space. And so when I think I've told this story on a podcast before. Apologies if people are listening and going, "You tell the same stories him," about when I fasted with them during Ramadan, and how different, how even though I didn't have the same religious belief as them, the fact that I would do that, and it was amazing. Their parents were bringing in extra food for me, and they invited me to their house to break fast and whatnot. And it actually, I've talked about this on stage when I've been at conferences and stuff before, is that one of the biggest privileges I ever had in my experience was in my teaching career, was being asked to go to the funeral of some students that had passed away, and being asked to be involved in speaking at and in an Islamic ceremony that doesn't normally happen. But I was invited to the mosque. I was invited to go on with a family. It was beautiful, and I'm almost convinced that was because we took the time to learn a little bit about who they were and appreciate difference in that. And I think that's massive. And interestingly, as we get into talking in a moment about the book, about kindness and about leading in that kind way, I realize that if you lead with that, and if you start by being kind, everything else happens, doesn't it? And having read your book, thinking, actually, this makes a lot of sense. If you can be kind, then you'll end up you can open doors that possibly you shouldn't have ever been able to open up. I'm gonna dig into a little bit of your international work and how that's developed before we talk about the book, though, if that's okay. And I know that for many people who are in that international school space, COBIS as an organisation, as a global organisation, bringing together those British international schools is flagship, and lots of people know and recognise that brand of authority of recognition and quality. And you work with them and supported them as lead improvement partner at COBIS. What does that work look like? And why? How did you get into that? Because in helping schools to improve it should be on everybody's agenda, right?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I got into it because when COBIS first said that they were going to start doing the accreditation, I didn't really understand what it was. And my school in France was going to go through the accreditation. And I thought, I don't understand this. And because it had just started, they put an advert out saying, if anybody wants to train to come and be a peer accreditor, they call it, then, we can do the training with you. So I thought, I'm going to do that because I don't understand it. I did all of the training. I read all of the manuals and I thought I understood it. Then you do a visit. Then you understand. It's not really until you've actually physically done it. And I was calculating the other day, I was in Japan the other week at a school there in Tokyo doing an accreditation for them. And that was visit number 23 that I've done in the world for COBIS. And honestly, all around the world. Unfortunately, I might have had to have gone to the Seychelles to do a visit there. I've been to Ascension Island. It's terrible. Ascension Island, I had to go to RAF Bryce Norton and fly on the RAF plane to get there because there's only one flight a week that goes to Ascension Island, then the Falkland Islands, and it turns around again. So it was me and a whole load of squaddies on a plane. It's really, for me, it's not inspection, it's accreditation, and it genuinely is about school improvement. And for me, that's what it should be about. So we have a relationship with the school for about 6 to 12 months before we actually go and visit the school. So you're talking to the head teacher, that they're gathering their evidence together. So you've got all of the standards there, which are really rigorous. They're getting all of their evidence together and uploading it. And you're talking to them constantly saying, could you just explain to me about this? Could you put some more evidence in about that? And then when you actually go to the school, it's more about validating what they do. And I always say to schools, for me, it's celebrating what you do really well and just pointing out some things that it's like 3 stars and a wish. This is what you do brilliantly. If you just thought about doing this could be a next step in making your school even better. And there's zero judgment. So it's not like at the end of it, you're saying this school's outstanding, this school's good, this school's weak or whatever. They're just given the report that tells them, this is what we saw, this is the evidence, this is what you do really, really well. And here are some ideas that you could do to make your school better. And then even better than that for me is we then stay in touch. So it's not like you fly in for 3 days, you make a judgment and you fly out. About a year later, they put their action plan in and we get in touch and say, what did you do in that 12 months since we last saw you? Do you need any support with anything? What have you been doing with this? And we keep in touch with them until the 5 years is up for the accreditation. And I think for me, that's something really special. And that genuinely shows me it's about improving your school. It's not about coming in and pulling it apart. It's helping people to make the schools better.
I think it's a very contradicting piece compared to other inspection frameworks.
Absolutely.
Where a new leader's come in or something's happened and everybody knows that if they came in at that point, then it's ultimately a new start, or there's lots of work to be done and everything else, but they still come in. There's no conversation to then say, come in, work with me, look at where we'll come in, this is what's happened and this is where I'm going to go. Let's work together over the next 6 months and have conversations and then come in. It's just a case of, no, appreciate that, but we're coming in anyway. And then they have to come back in the 6 months. There's no relationship, no conversation. It's just simply this is what we have to do. We have to tick the box. We have to make this judgment right now, and there is no wiggle room or no conversation or movement that can be had. And it's so it's so interesting. But I suppose the key bit for me is it didn't sound like you're going to support COBIS in Portsmouth. It's only amazing places. So does it happen in Portsmouth as well, and all those different places? It's not just Seychelles and Japan and all these wonderful things.
Steve, can I just stop, Steve? Really, we have a lot of listeners who live in Portsmouth. Portsmouth is a beautiful place. We love you. He's not dissing Portsmouth at all.
I'm not criticising Portsmouth. What I'm saying is, like, ultimately there will be COBIS organisations within Portsmouth. They'll be there in Blackburn and all these places. I don't know why. It's maybe you haven't been to Stoke on a Tuesday night during the Championship thing. Have you done it on a Tuesday night in Stoke? This blueprint and this model and this relationship is actually global, rather than it just being applicable for those far to reach places or those shiny places. Actually, this is what happens. Normality.
And I think also every school's different, and it's really sort of, so the standards are the same. Kids are kids all around the world. It doesn't matter where you go. It always makes me laugh because you do an interview with the kids. They always complain about toilets and the canteen. Doesn't matter where you are in the world. That's what the kids care about. But I think for me, there's nothing wrong with frameworks. There's nothing wrong with the Ofsted framework. But if it was delivered with kindness, it's somebody's school is their baby. And I think if you have that in mind when you're communicating with people and talking to them about it, and just be aware. And I think about my daughter won't mind me saying this. My daughter was really upset the other day because she works in Darlington. She's an English teacher, and they got the call for Ofsted. They were in there. She was stressed to death. And I said, just try your best. It's just be your normal self. You'll be absolutely fine. First day came to an end. She hadn't been seen. Second day came to an end. She hadn't been seen. And she said, well, that's great. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, now when they make a judgment on our department, if it does really well, everybody's going to go, yeah, well, it wasn't you because they didn't see you. If it does really badly, I'm going to be going, well, hang on a minute, that's not fair because they didn't see me. And I think the way that we do it in COBIS is we try to be really fair and see as many people as possible. And it's really, it's delivered with kindness. And I think that's where a lot of these systems fall down. And I think I was talking to somebody the other week, and they said that a friend of theirs had become an Ofsted inspector who had previously been a lovely bloke. So when he was a teacher and when he was a leader in a school, nicest bloke you could meet, he became an inspector, and suddenly his whole personality changed. He became this really hardline person, and it's just not necessary.
No, it's not. And I suppose some people become like that when they become leaders, don't they? Or you get a title and all of a sudden you can't be somebody's friend. And I know that will come up with that. Can you be a friend and be a leader? Can you be an inspector and be kind? And the answer is yes. They're not polar opposites. They're not mutually exclusive. I think just to kind of develop what you were saying, and I think there is an opportunity, and there was an opportunity at least when Ofsted was the changes happened at Ofsted. They had a really good opportunity, and I think I really applaud this. And we don't do this very often because you can imagine we're thinking about different ways of doing education. Ofsted doesn't usually get a massive, but we really welcome the fact that it is now more conversational, that it's not a single word judgment, that it's supposed to be representative across things. But if I'm being really honest, the outputs that we found in the earliest things of inspection of Ofsted have said that if you are a school that has got a high level of deprivation, you've got a high amount of SEND, you are going to perform lower. That's just a fact of what's come out of what's going on now, and that should never be what the purpose of it is. And again, we're not Ofsted bashing. We're talking about what there is an alternative, because some people say, well, we've got to have inspection. We need accountability. Well, we can, and we do need that because it's public money or it's parents' money. It's really important that we have accountability and responsibility and take that seriously. And therefore, having people like yourselves and others, and I think that's powerful as well, that's a serving principle that goes and works in that space. And I think that matters, rather than I'm sat here as an external. I don't work in a school and I'm not in a principal's environment now. Do I, should I be making decisions if I've not been, when last time I was in a classroom or last time I was in a school was a period of time ago? But we won't get on that high horse too long, because actually where you took it and what you said was, you can do this and you can be kind. And actually, the COBIS accreditations, the conversation there is about kind. And I mentioned it right at the top of the show, but also right in front of us now, if you're watching this, I'm showing our copy of Kind Leadership, and the subtitle is Leading Schools with Empathy, Honesty, and Impact. And some of the I looked at some of the recommendations and some of the elements in the blurb are from people that have been on the podcast previously. A good chunk of them. Paul Dix and Patrick Cozier have been in there. We interviewed Patrick relatively recently as well. So you've written this book. You said you've been 30 years experience in education across the UK, France, and the UAE. Why does this exist as a book?
Be honest with you, through awful experiences that I had, what I can't understand in schools sometimes is we spend all of our time, and rightly so, I'm really student-centred. You know, it sounds glib to say it, but I really am student-centred. I'm all about the kids. But we tell everybody about kindness, about treating the kids with fairness, about being, you know, don't shout at them, don't punish everybody. If one kid does something wrong, don't keep the class in. But what I experienced in schools is that we're not doing it with the adults. And I think for me, that Paul Dix is a massive hero of mine, and what he says about how to behave with children and how to have behaviour management with kids. I was looking at what was going on, and when I left France, I think I was probably at the lowest point I have ever been that I would ever want to be in my career. And it came from very quickly, the school became toxic. So 15 years of absolutely loving my job, skipping to work in the morning with a massive smile on my face. I actually thought I'd die in the school and you'd have to bury me in the forest behind it, because I loved the school that much. I never, ever thought that I would leave that school. Really quickly, it turned toxic, and watching that happen, like I say, I think I came as close to having a nervous breakdown as I ever want to get to in my life, and I wouldn't want anybody else to experience that. And I think I put on LinkedIn the other day, Mustafa Ibrahim did a quote about, I wouldn't ever want to be the reason why somebody stopped wearing bright clothes, or why somebody stopped speaking up, or why is it? And it really stuck with me when I read that quote, and I just thought, this is what it's about. There's no need to be unkind. If we treat people with kindness in schools, we've got a massive problem with retention. We've got a massive problem with recruitment. There was some statistic came out recently about head teachers, and they've been doing loads of training with teachers in the UK and middle leaders and senior leaders in the UK, and said, you know, what about stepping up into headship? Oh, no, absolutely no way. Well, I can tell you it's the best job in the world. I really do love my job. But we've got a problem that people can't see that it's the best job in the world. And the same with teachers. And again, just this week, somebody's published something that said something like 5% of people that train to be teachers will actually continue to be a teacher 5 years after they've finished their PGCE or their BEd. That's shocking. You know, and we can't keep blaming kids' behaviour, workload. The OECD, again, published something recently. It was at the COBIS conference. Andreas was talking about it. The number one reason for teacher happiness, good leadership. And the number one reason teachers leave schools, bad leadership. So we need to do something about it.
That 5%, it's that will complete or go through study and then become and stay in the role for 5 years. It's not as if it's a case of, oh yeah, like other industries, it's really hard to get into. I'm not saying it's not a difficult job to get into, but there is a shortage. So you'd like to think that start, and if it's a constant cycle of training, how many do we train each year that never really progress and stay? And I think the kind leadership mentality that you've just started to share there is that whole, some people will look at it the same as what they did and often do with Brené Brown stuff, where they look and then go, oh, you have a vulnerable leadership, kind leadership. Yeah, but sometimes you have to be not kind. And it's like, no, it's not a, you either are this or this. It's actually, sometimes you have to be kind, but actually be honest. All of those kind of things. Kind doesn't mean unfair. Kind doesn't mean letting people just get away with everything. That's not what you're saying in the book. It's ultimately, what does that look like? What does that feel like? And sometimes kindness is actually being honest and saying this school or this organisation isn't for you, or this role isn't for you. That's absolutely fine. All of those kind of things exist, but can be done in a kind way. And somebody reminded me, I think it was something like Real Housewives of New Orleans or something. I don't know where they got this quote from, but they said, say what you mean, don't say it mean.
I
And I
like
think
that.
and I was like, that's why I use it all the time. I was like, regardless where it comes from, say what you mean, but just don't say it mean is a real thing of be honest, but there's a way that you can deliver that message with kindness and understanding of where that position will come from and the person will receive.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So just
Agreed.
go on,
Totally. I couldn't agree more. Like, I really think that I'm giggling aware that you've got that from Real Housewives or wherever it is.
Well, I like a bit of Real Housewives. Me, don't worry.
Oh, well, my wife does, and I just think I don't get it, but
It's escapism.
possibly it's probably why I watch football. And she says, "Why do you watch that? You don't even support that team." I was like, "I just love football." So this
I
is
love
perfect
football as
time
well.
for me. I really love digging into this book, and so you've obviously talked about there is a different way to do this, and I'm going to jump to something, and I'll mention it there. But one of my we'll talk about the chase thing in a moment because I know that's how you built the framework around it. But I want to ask that question because it ties into what Steve was talking about. There is that there's a quote in it that's been attributed to Al Capone, isn't there? And obviously about kindness not being the same as weakness. And that is really, like, on my mind, something it really resonated with me. That I just thought to myself, I've thought that if I'm kind and I offer things and I do things nicely to people, then they're just going to think I'm a pushover and I'm weak and I'm this and that and the other. And you really addressed that head on, didn't you? Could you maybe just like dig into that about why do you think kindness and weakness sometimes get conflated and why you talked about that in that space?
Yeah, I think for me it was that Al Capone quote was really preying on my mind, and that was one of the reasons that I actually started writing the book, because I think people misunderstand the difference between being kind and being nice. So if you're just being nice, you're usually people pleasing, or you're pleasing yourself. You know, you don't want to have a problem, you don't want to cause an issue. So if you're nice, you know, you might say, yeah, it's absolutely fine, but you don't mean it because you're not being honest. Nice is keeping the peace, nice is just keeping the status quo, not wanting to ruffle any feathers, not actually saying what you mean because you don't want to be in trouble with somebody, you don't want to offend them. There's a difference between being nice and being kind. Being kind would be to actually tell somebody how you're feeling and what you're thinking and the reasons behind things. You don't have to keep the status quo. And I think for me, it's been really interesting. So I first spoke about the Chase framework and kind leadership in May 2025. I'd already done a kind of draft of the book, and at the COBIS conference I'd applied to speak. And I thought, oh, no one's going to want to know about this. And so I'd applied to speak, and they said to me, I just thought there'd be like 10 people in a room. So I'd done like a little workshop with big bits of paper and things. And Fiona had messaged me and she said, we're going to have to move you. We need to put you in the big room. And I was like, oh, no, but I need tables and I need that. And she said, no, you're going to have to totally change the way you do it. You're going to have to do a presentation. And I went, yeah, all right. Then I said, what do you mean the big room? And she said, the main presentation hall. And she said, too many people have said they want to come. And I was going, yeah. But before the conference, there's like a little app that they can send things out and you can ask the presenter a question. And it fascinated me. Is it a woman thing? No. You know, some of the most unkind people I've worked with have been women, and some of the kindness have been men. And the other one was, you can't be kind and accountable. You know, you can't do this all the time. You can't be kind. And I was like, no, you don't understand what being kind means. But on the actual day I turned up there, like I say, expecting 10 people, there must have been about 200. And it made me think, actually, people do want to hear about this and they do want to understand, and people are bothered about being kind. And what made me laugh as well is like the lack of understanding of kindness. So I was talking about a colleague who, he'd literally come to me. It's weird in the UAE, they have like contracts that last 2 years. And somebody came to me and said, oh, this person, don't renew the contract. And I went, pardon? And he said, don't renew the contract, they're no good. And I said, what do you mean they're no good? No, just it's getting to resignation day and termination day, they call it. So, you know, get rid of her on that day. Tell her you're not going to renew her contract. So I said, all right, have you done lesson observations? Give me the evidence. Well, and I said, show me the evidence. Where have you looked at her planning? Where have you helped her to go through it? Where's the support plan? Where are all your lesson observations where you've gone through and you aren't able to show improvement? When have you modelled best practice? When have you gone in and team talk with her? And he looked at me and he went, I haven't. And I went, I'll tell you what then, I'm not going to renew your contract. Well, his face went white and I just went, I am. And I'm just trying to mirror it for you. that you are saying to this person, I'm not keeping you on because she hasn't done a job well enough. Well, you haven't done yours well enough. When we come back next year, I'm not firing her. When we come back next year, I want the support plan. You show me what you've done with this person, then I'll consider not renewing their contract. And I told that story. And the man who, I don't know who it was, I've never seen him again, came up to me and he said, you've made me feel awful. And I said, oh, sorry, that wasn't my intention. And he said, no, I feel awful. Somebody in his school had literally the day before the conference bought him a list of people and said, these people need to go. Don't renew their contracts. And he went, all right, and just signed. And he said, I didn't even ask, what have you done? And I just went, oh, that's not kind leadership. And I think for me, that's what it is. And it's not weakness, because you do sometimes have to let people go, exactly what you were saying. But show me what you did to support that person. If that doesn't work, then by all means they can go. But if you haven't supported them, don't come to me and say they need to be got rid of.
The key there is what's easy and what is leadership. And sometimes kindness is being kind to the person who was the end outcome rather than the person in front of you, and thinking bigger picture. I think is really key there.
And you're really good on this. We've had this conversation multiple times when I've think about Steve as a leader, is that he talks about clear is kind. I know it's come there in actually being clear and saying what you mean is really kind, based on the conversation and with Radical Candor stuff, with Kim Scott and whatnot. But also, you sometimes have got to deliver really difficult things, and if you do it in a kind way, it's not about being a smiling assassin. That's a totally different thing, isn't it? And I think we've had this conversation. We're quite open about this as a two people running an organization. We don't always agree on everything, but we can have clarity and we can have kindness. We can go, this, and this isn't right, or we want to do this, and then the other people can disagree with that, and you can disagree proactively in a kind way as well, can't you? And I think some of that is based in fact, not some of this, a lot of that is based in the Chase framework that you developed. And obviously it's won some awards as a framework, and your first time you spoke about it, like you said, at the conference, it's been really well thought through, and it's been adopted in loads of different places. I wonder if you could talk our listeners through the Chase framework and how, because these are the building blocks of what it means to be a kind leader, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you. For me, there's nothing new. And I've said very openly in the book, nothing you read is new. You all know this stuff. But I think for me, what I wanted to do is pull together everything, if that makes sense. So you've got Radical Candor, you've got Dare to Lead, you've got Simon Sinek's Start With Why, you've got all of these different books and ideas and experiences that people have. And I just thought, I'm still a teacher at heart. We need something to remember it by. So I was driving along by I don't sleep, I've got ADHD. And I was driving along by a petrol station and I was thinking, I need something that helps people remember. And so I was driving along and I just thought, hang on, Simon Sinek says that you can chase happiness. Oh, you could chase kindness. And then I was thinking, hang on a minute. My brain was like working at 100 miles an hour. And I just thought, hang on, communication, this works. So I thought communication, honesty, accountability, self-esteem and ego. I have to be honest, I started with the ego first. So the E was the first one that I was thinking about, because I think a lot of things that leaders do when they're unkind is because their ego's out of control. So I got back to my office. I remember I was writing it down really quickly because I thought I'm going to forget this. And I wrote it down and I thought that works for a clear way of getting through to everybody. If you want to be a kind leader, you have to communicate with compassion and clarity. You have to always be honest. You have to hold people accountable and yourself accountable. You need to have a high self-esteem, and you're responsible for the self-esteem of the people in your care, and keep your ego in check.
The ego thing's a really interesting one, because when things don't go well, I think this links back to a conversation we had with Ian McRitchie around when failure happens, people see it as attributed to, just trying to think of the right word that we used, a shame. So we link it to shame, and ultimately, often the human nature will deflect, look and think, there's a shame attached to this. As a leader, who can I look at and and everything else. But often it might not be a person. It might be you. It might be a person, but often it's attributed to a process or something that you have put in place. And I often talk about bridge, not bridge builder. Have you gone through the steps to look at the bridge that was built and all of the processes and everything else that have caused that bridge to break, rather than the actual person who was putting the thing together? It might come back down to this, and it might be human negligence, it might be capability, but actually often it will be a process or something that you as a leader has implemented or allowed to happen, and you just have to then step back and say, let's not put blame or shame into it. What does this look like, and how do we step forward? And linking back to that conversation of ego of success is also a bit of a bugger. Because when somebody does well and you see all over social media, I've done this, and brilliant, you have, but there's been a collective people around you at some point, whether they have worked alongside you or whether you're a person who works on their own. Ultimately, there's lots of people have got you to that greatness. And I think ego is attached to success and failure. And human nature means that they hide it and push it to somebody else. But when the success happens, they push it to themselves. And how do we
100%.
be kind to it? And I think that's a really interesting conversation. And how do we be kind to ourselves without overinflating our own ego and forgetting actually everything that's got us to that point?
Absolutely. And I'm smiling because the S, you're going to get this with Crown House. Just you wait. The S originally, when I first put the manuscript in, was shame. So it was communication, honesty, accountability, shame, and ego. And I had a lovely email going, that's too negative. You need to change the S. So I did keep shame in that chapter, I'll be honest, because I think shame is a really big thing. But I flipped it to be a more positive self-esteem rather than making it negative. So I was smiling as you were saying about shame.
I think I think there's something beautiful as well of the example. I was just trying to find it as you were both talking there. You talk about when you came shopping back into the UK and picked up that red jacket, and it really tickled me about this idea of this kindness to yourself, as well as like you tell the story, because I'll ruin it, and I don't want to take the story away. Just tell that story, because I think people really resonate with that.
If I knew you were going to ask me, I would have worn the actual red jacket. So I went shopping in Phoenix in Newcastle with my granddaughter, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw this bright red jacket, and I thought, I really like that. And it was in the designer section, and I thought, I'm not going to be able to afford that. So I went over and I thought, won't be my size. I looked at the label, it was my size. And then I thought, there's no way this is going to be like really expensive. So I looked at the label and it had 75% off. So I tried it on and I said to my granddaughter, what do you think? And she went, ooh, fancy. So I thought, oh, I'm going to get this. So I bought it. Didn't tell my husband how much it cost. I hope he doesn't listen to this. So I bought it. I was lying the night before school started. That was in the summer holidays. The night before school started, I thought, oh, what am I going to wear tomorrow? It's the first day of school. We've got new parents coming. We've got new teachers. I want to wear something. And I thought, hold on a minute, I'm going to wear my fancy jacket. So I put my fancy jacket on and I thought I looked really nice. I'd done my hair and I thought, I'm looking really smart for all of these new people in the school. And I stood on the gate and this little girl, Latifah, she's called, her mum knows it was her that did it, came skipping up and she said, hi, Miss Joanna. And I said, hi, Latifah, did you have a nice holiday? And she said, yeah, did you? And I said, yeah. And she said, I missed you. And I said, oh, I missed you too. And she looked at my jacket. She looked me up and down and she went, you look like a tomato. And she skipped off. And the reason that I told that story was, doesn't matter what you do, for your self-esteem and for looking after yourself, some people are going to think you look fancy and some people are going to think you look like a tomato, and there is absolutely nothing you can do about it. So just go with it. Not everybody's going to like you, so get over it.
And that links into a thing that I'd like to explore in regards to this whole thing of being liked, but also leading. Like people often are fearful and become over empathetic because as a leader they want to be liked. And I think we have to face facts that sometimes you might not be liked. People might absolutely love you, and I'm sure there's leaders out there that everybody absolutely adores them. But I think that difference between being respected and being liked, often they do feel the same, and that's really, really nice. But that are they mutually exclusive, or can you do both? I suppose as a leader, and how do you feel about that?
I think it's not mutually exclusive in that if you always act with integrity, if you are kind, it's just not the same goal. Do you see what I mean? So if you're acting as a kind leader, naturally there'll be a kind of osmosis where people understand that sometimes you need to make tough decisions as long as you're being kind and you're explaining the why. So it won't mean that they don't like you. It's that they understand the decisions that were made and that needed to be difficult. And I think it's not about not being liked. You can't expect people to like you all the time. Sometimes it's a personality thing. But I think as long as people understand the processes behind what you've done, then they will naturally probably like you more than they would if you were delivering things in an unkind way. Does that make sense? It's just by osmosis.
Of course it is. And I think people, there's also this misnomer in a lot of people's minds around liked and respected. Are they different? And I think, interestingly, those people who are like, I'm not here to be liked, I'm here to be respected, will probably be living in that world of control, fear. We follow rules, and it's very draconian in lots of ways. But actually, do they have loyalty beyond that? Will people work to rule then in that space? Probably, because they know that it's going to be that level that sits there.
And consistency as well. Sorry, Ben, it's being consistent. I was really upset talking to somebody the other month, and she'd said somebody who had been her previous boss, she didn't know which person she was going to get on what day, and it was like walking on eggshells. And I thought, that's so sad that you can't go to work and not know that you're going to be greeted with a smile and told, hello. We all have bad days. I apologised to somebody the other day because she said, have I done something to offend you? And I said, I'm really sorry. I'm just super busy and I'm a bit stressed, so I'm not my usual happy, smiley self. And she went, oh, that's all right. Then I said, but thank you for asking, because I'd rather, she said, have I done something to upset you? And I could go, oh, no, I haven't, than her going away and thinking I must have done something to upset her, and then that upset her. But it's about just what you were saying before, it's professional dialogue.
Yeah, and I think tied to that is that ability, just being honest. So kindness is about you talk. One of the things is about being honest and saying, I'm not at my best today. This is funny. My wife's not listening, I don't think. If she is, and she's got to this point in a podcast, I'm very, very surprised. Yesterday, she got back from work, and I'd been sorting the kids and working at the same time and whatnot, and I was grumpy. I was probably hangry because I was ready for food as well, but I was definitely grumpy. And at the end of the night, she just went, "What is wrong with you? Why have you been so grumpy today?" And I was like, and then I started pointing fingers everywhere, and she went, "It's all right that you're grumpy, like, but stop trying to pretend that you're not grumpy. If you're being grumpy, you're being hangry, like." And this morning when I got back from the gym, and she says, "Are we in a better mood today? Are we starting today of a better mood?" And I was like, oh my goodness me. And I think she bought me a cake today, which is totally ironic considering I went to the gym and then she's bought me a cake too. But I think she felt like that would cheer me up. I want to just dig into a couple of other bits before we wrap today as well. And one of the things that it's not in what we've prepared there, but I was taken by the fact that you brought in some examples of people that everybody will know, famous people, who have been known to be kind, but that doesn't mean that they're perfect, and that they get everything right, and they don't have to. And I'm drawn to that because the book I wrote a couple of years, a year and a half ago, was I talked about ideas guys who, men and women, that they don't have to be perfect, and in fact, but we can learn from them. That was how I picked it up. That an Elon Musk and a Joe Rogan and a Sam Altman, we can learn from these people. They don't have to be perfect people to be able to learn from them. And you've done the same, I think, around kindness, in terms of that we can, from a legacy perspective, and what we can learn from those people. Could you maybe just tell us a little bit about why you chose the people you chose?
Yeah, it goes back to Al Capone again, bless him. So the full quote that's attributed to him is, "Don't mistake my kindness for weakness. I'm kind to everybody, but if you're not kind for me, my kindness isn't what you're going to remember." And I think for me, it's about legacy. And for him, he thought he was kind. And so I actually did some research into it, and I read a whole load of books about him, and apparently he was. So in certain circles, if you needed money, if you were part of his gang and you were hard on your luck and things had gone wrong for you, he would give you the money. Or if you needed a job, he'd give you the job. He started soup kitchens in the Depression to feed people on the streets of Chicago. So he thought that he was kind, but that's not what we remember him for. We remember him as being a murdering, tax evaded person who got put in Alcatraz. So his kindness, it's about the balance of your legacy. We don't remember the kindness that he did. And he was kind, but he was more unkind. And that's what we remember him for. So I chose 3 people. So Mahatma Gandhi, who we all know, peaceful protest, one of the kindest things that you can do, non-violent. He wanted everybody to, have these non-violent protests. But actually, he made some awful comments in his lifetime that would now, he'd be cancelled, as the Americans say nowadays, for some of the comments that he made in South Africa, because obviously he believed in the caste system. And so he made comments about the colour of people's skin and value, which now, if people saw that, it'd be horrified. But that's not what we remember him for, because the kindness that he showed and the peacefulness that he had outweighed those comments that he made in one country. And then Princess Diana, bless her, the queen of everybody's hearts, really compassionate, kind. When you think about the barriers that she broke down in the 1980s, you two are probably too young, but, she was hanging around with homeless people. She was the first person that actually physically, she hugged somebody with HIV/AIDS. And in those days, that was just absolutely unheard of. But, bless her, she made some mistakes in her personal life and it all played out in the media and we all saw it go horribly wrong in her marriage. But that's not what we remember her for. We remember her as being a compassionate and kind person. And then the final one was Martin Luther King, who again made mistakes in his personal life. His wife, that there are reports, again, I did a lot of research into it, the reports that he was unfaithful to his wife. He just quite recently, like within the last decade, evidence has come to light that he plagiarized his doctorates. So there's all of these things that you wouldn't think of him as being kind, but we all remember I Have a Dream and his fight for civil rights. And so we remember these people for being kind and compassionate so we can forgive the mistakes that they've made. And that's what I was trying to say to leaders, is that nobody is perfect. But if your kindness outweighs the mistakes that you make and you take ownership for your mistakes, then your legacy will be one of kindness.
I think imperfection or imperfect leadership and imperfect kindness. Nobody's saying anybody's perfect. What we're saying is we're just giving it our best shot, and the ability to reflect in life, whether you're a leader or you're being led, I think is one of the most important characteristics of a person. It shows that you can really understand that you have a part to play in certain aspects and you could have done things differently. And I think the reflective nature of humans will either shine a positive light or a negative light. It's not about not making those mistakes. It's the ability to then think, what could I have done better? And let me be open and honest about it. So we've shone a light and talked about that. What does being kind to yourself then look like in regards to that? As a final thought before we go into quick fire, because we can do all these other things. And I think that's the kind of bit of often is the hardest.
It absolutely is. And my husband, again, if he listens to this, he's going to be laughing because I have to credit him with this one. I wrote the whole manuscript. I gave it to him and I said, come on, read it. What do you think? And I'm really lucky because I live with a classroom teacher. So I see the stresses of working in a classroom. He read it and he went, yeah, it's good. And he said, but you missed a bit. And I said, what do you mean missed a bit? And he said, you missed a chapter. And I said, a chapter on what? And I said, no, I've done everything. CHASE, legacy. And he just went, being kind to yourself. And he said, I knew you wouldn't do that. And I was like, yeah, I'm terrible at being kind to myself. I've had to learn and I have to step back. And I just think you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to rush things either. You don't have to make a decision right away. My team are so used to me now that I'll just say, I need to sleep on this because I need time. I don't even necessarily need to sleep on it. I just need to step out of that moment in time. Maybe my ego's been flared up. Somebody's maybe disagreed with a decision that I've made and I can feel myself getting a bit angry, which I shouldn't do. So I need to stop myself and step away from it. Saying to people, stopping me in the corridor and asking me a question, because I'm going to, every time I walk down a corridor, 20 people ask me a question. There are times and places to have the right discussion. And I think one of the biggest things for me is, and I put it in the book, worrying about things that don't happen. And if I could give people one thing, this is going to make Ben laugh. I've got a friend and she's not particularly religious, but I would call her spiritual. You don't have to believe in God. But one day I was really worried about something and she said, "Oh, do you know what you need?" And I said, "What?" And she said, "You need a God's job jar." And I went, "A what?" And she said, "God's job jar." And she said, "What I've done is I got an old Nescafe jar, I rinsed it out and I put a little label on and I've called it God's job jar." And she said, "When I'm worried about something, I write it on a piece of paper, I stick it in God's job jar and I say, 'This is one for you.' I close the lid and I stick it in the cupboard. And do you know what? When I go back in 6 weeks' time, he sorted it for me." And I thought, that is absolute genius. You don't have to believe in God, but the things that you worry about, quite often there's just no need. And so sometimes I do a little God's job jar and put it in. And I told a story in the book that my favourite one, where I really get annoyed with myself, was we had a really difficult parents in France. And the day before a holiday, it was the Thursday, and we were breaking up for the holidays on the Friday. And my secretary came in and she said, "Mrs. Thompson's here to see you." And I went, "Oh, okay." And she said she's got an appointment to come and see you at 8:00 tomorrow. And I said, "Well, what does she want?" And she said, "I don't know. She's coming in tomorrow morning." Honestly, I did not sleep. The whole night I was thinking, she's going to be annoyed about this. Oh no, maybe she's annoyed about that. Oh, if she says this, I'll say that. And I didn't sleep all night. I remember Elizabeth coming in at 8:00 and saying, "She's here." And I can physically remember the reaction. And I talk about sort of physical reactions in the book as well. I remember going, "Oh, come on, you can do this." And I walked out and I went, "Good morning." She had a massive bouquet of flowers and a huge box of chocolates. And she went, "Thank you so much for everything that you do for my son. I just wanted to give you these to say thank you and have a lovely holiday." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And I still think of that moment. I did not sleep for a bouquet of flowers and a box of chocolates. That's mad. So don't do that, is my advice.
Yeah, and there's lots there that people can take in their own space, isn't there? Like, what does it mean being kind to yourself is subjective, is by definition, isn't it? I know kindness for me is I do need space, but I also need people. That's the kind thing for me. And being kind to myself is going, "Do you know what? You haven't got through everything. I have a to-do list. I write it every day. Do you know, I have a really weird habit when it comes to Post-it notes. I don't want to, if I've got to go to the next Post-it note on the page, I have to take that one off and I have to write them again, because I can't have it not weird. I don't know why. I'm weird. But the principle is, if I don't get through everything, that's being kind to me, myself, and whatever that looks like, for whoever you are listening to this or watching this, finding the ways to be kind to yourself is really important. And we would definitely recommend grabbing hold of a copy of Joanna's book, Kind Leadership. The link will be in the show notes. Steve's got his there as well. I really enjoyed reading this, and I've enjoyed the conversation. We always finish our Edufuturist podcast with 3 quickfire questions, and some people nail quickfire, some people don't nail quickfire. The key's in the name, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody can do it well. So I'm going to ask one, then Steve, and then me to wrap up today. So the first question, and this is quite interesting considering how we started the podcast: if schools were judged like restaurants by how much customers actually enjoyed the experience, what would change overnight?
I think that some people would get very different inspection reports than they do when people walk into their room and see them, because you can put on a show. So any inspector walking into for 2 days, you can put on a show for, but the people who are actually there all the time eating your food know what's really going on. So I think it would flip the narrative, and I think that would be a wonderful thing.
Next one. What's the most dangerous myth that educators tell themselves to avoid real change?
Oh, can I give you 2? One is, we've always done it like that. And the other one is, that won't work here, which is 2 sides of the same coin, really. But I think that's the most dangerous things I hear in education is, that won't work here, or we've always done it like that. So what do we need to change it for?
Absolutely. And the third one, if a 10-year-old asked you why they have to go to school, what would you actually say?
I would say because school is the best place in the world and it teaches you how to be a wonderful person. Not necessarily, I wouldn't even talk about education and learning, but I think for me, it's about developing the whole person. And school was the best time of my life. And I tell my kids, they always feel really sorry for me because I say to them, I went to school, then I went to university and I learned how to work in a school. And then I went back to school. I've never left school. And they go, oh, that's really sad. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's great. I love my job. So I think I would say you have to go to school because it's the best thing in the world and it will help you become a really good person.
Absolutely. Love that.
Always
I do
end
that. It is a wonderful way. Joanna, it's been wonderful. Thank you for giving us your time, and especially in the midst of a busy season. We're grateful that you have written the book, that you are doing the work that you're doing, and that we've got leaders in education who are kind and that want to spread that idea of kindness. So thank you for what you've shared with us, and we're looking forward to probably let's have more conversations. And who knows? Steve's never been to Abu Dhabi. I've been, and I love it. So
anytime.
There you go. Maybe we can have an Edufuturist event in the UAE. Let's see. We'll talk off the podcast, but it's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
What an absolute wonderful thing, and thanks for agreeing, Joanna. Everybody's heard it now on the podcast.
Seychelles, UAE, and Japan. We're happy.
And Portsmouth. Let's get them all in.
We can go global.
We could go global. Amazing. Thanks, everybody, and thanks for listening. And see you again on another episode of the Edufuturist podcast.